I'd like to call the meeting to order. This meeting is being recorded. I would ask if there's anyone else recording the meeting. Seeing no one, if you'd please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome, everyone. Nice to have you here. The reason for this meeting is we will be conducting an interview for Dr. Brunel's replacement, and we have Mr. Casey Hanfield, who was the sole internal applicant. And Mr. Hanfield, if you'd like to join us up here, we'd love to ask you some questions.
We don't throw things.
No, that's okay. I've been on both sides of this. Good evening.
All right, good evening. Welcome.
Thank you.
I think you're well known to everyone in the room, but in case anyone at home is curious as to who you are, if you wouldn't mind just a brief introduction, that'd be great.
Brief in the sense of just hi, who am I, or brief in the sense of where I've been and...
No, none of the where I've been. We'll save that for
Okay.
after, I think. Where have you been tonight? Is that
Oh, no, I don't mean tonight. I wasn't sure if, you were looking for, kind of just a quick explanation of, kind of educational background, job experiences, things like that, or...
I think we could probably save all of that for the end.
Okay, that's fine.
That would be great.
So, good evening, and first of all, I'd like to thank my fellow colleagues who are in attendance tonight, Mr. and Mrs. Longchamp, who have been with me a long time. I'd like to thank you very much. And to everybody at home, good evening. Whether you're watching this now live or you'll be watching this later recorded. My name is Casey Hanfield, and as Mr. Scobie said, I am a candidate for the superintendency of the Auburn Public Schools.
Excellent. Well, we'd like to get started and ask you a few questions if you're ready.
I'm ready.
I will lead off, Mr. Hanfield. You have obviously formed many relationships throughout the years as both a resident of Auburn and as principal of Auburn High. Explain how you would maintain those relationships as superintendent of schools. Specifically, describe your approach to communicating with staff, parents, residents, town departments, and lastly, school committee.
Give that one more time, please.
Sure. Explain how you would maintain, I'm sorry, I'll start from the beginning.
Sure.
You have obviously formed many relationships throughout the years as both a resident of Auburn and as principal of Auburn High. Explain how you would maintain those relationships as superintendent of schools. Specifically, describe your approach to communicating with staff, parents, residents, town departments, and lastly, school committee.
So I think, first and foremost, just in terms of communication in general, I think whenever possible, communicating in person is always the best way to go. And if not that, then I think, via telephone, where there's actually voices on the phone. I think in today's day and age when, technology via email and texting and other social media are quick and convenient, I think a lot of times, not to say that they're not appropriate, but I think at times there can be tone misinterpreted. And so in a situation as superintendent of schools, I would never want to be communicating in a fashion where it was misinterpreted due to that. That being said, each one of these groups that you've described is kind of a nested, ecosystem, if you will, within the town. I think the manner within which you communicate to different groups, I think, is different based on the conversations and things that you're having. As somebody who, was a graduate of the high school and a resident and a parent and a principal, I know that there are different ways that you're communicating. So, for example, if I'm speaking, with colleagues among town departments, that conversation is very much rooted as here is, the superintendent of schools representing the interests of the students and families of Auburn. If I'm speaking to parents, then I'm also speaking as the superintendent of schools, but I'm also speaking perhaps to them as a parent, having two children that have gone through Auburn High School. And so, not to go through every, kind of, group that you discussed, but I think you get where I'm going in the sense that the perspective in the way that you do that changes. Now, obviously, that being said, you can't possibly speak to everyone face-to-face or on that phone call as much as you would like. So for broader communications, certainly, you need to use the one-call system, whether it's email or telephone or Facebook, which is becoming, quite a popular, tool for at least the parents of our students. That seemingly is their preferred method of digital communication. So I think you just have to be really thoughtful about the conversations you're having. I think you have to be very mindful of the audience that you're communicating to. And then I think you have to pick your approaches in that vein. And I think in my role as principal, I've done that. Especially, you have to gauge the situations, right? You have to gauge the situations. There's a litany of ways you can communicate. I don't think I need to go through Facebook, Twitter, all those things, but
No, I think you've,
but I think that's kind of the lay of the land. I also think, it's always important too, to the extent possible, layer of transparency, layer of, honesty, giving people, exactly what it is that's going on, good, bad, or indifferent. During my 15 years as a high school principal, there's not really much I haven't seen or had to, kind of manage or lead, whether it be death of a faculty member, death of a student, the Parkland, high school massacre, which was quite an event in the United States and certainly gripped Auburn High School for a period of time. I've dealt with gas leaks, Funghua bus rollovers, just a lot of wide and varied things. And in all of those cases, there's a certain tone and manner of communication that you have to strike. And I think, I'm fairly adept at doing that.
I think so as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I have the next question for
Sure.
you. The current district strategic plan was created in 2017 based on the input of many people from across the Auburn community. Share with us your experiences with the development and ongoing maintenance of that plan and how you would envision your role in the plan going forward.
Okay. So one of the pieces of my candidacy, I think that's fairly unique, is that I'm kind of at least I see myself as kind of the past, the present, and the future. And what I mean by that is in 2007, when we were prior to Dr. Brunel's arrival, we had an interim superintendent, Dr. William Allen, who has unfortunately since passed away. And he brought a lot to us in that year. And one of the things that he brought to us was the whole idea of a strategic plan. And the importance of a strategic plan, and the fact that we didn't have one. For a lot of us, it was somewhat of a novel idea. Really what a strategic plan is, it's the rudder, right, of any organization. It guides what you do. It keeps you on track. It brings you back to not only what you believe in as an organization, but also what those folks who created it with you, what they believed in as well. So just let me say, first off, it's immensely important. My experience in the one with 2007 was not as inclusive as a process that I think we've had in the last two. Certainly as administrators, we had a say in what we created in 2007. But I think when Dr. Brunel came on board and it was time to revisit the strategic plan and craft a new one, the whole idea of the World Cafe that she facilitated made a lot of sense. One of the things about strategic plans that I think is a really good thing is that I think the more people you have involved, the stronger you are. And one of the things that the strategic plan has brought us at 2012 and again in 2017 is the cross-section of the community. And they bring their ideas, their thoughts, and they have a vested stake in the Auburn Public Schools. And so as we're sitting there crafting strategic plans, that's immensely critical. In terms of what I think moving forward, I think the plan that we have now is a very thoughtful plan. teaching and learning, technology, transitions, community partnerships, and health, wellness, and safety are the 5 broad topics. And within that, as you know, you and I work together on the current one, community partnerships. It's invaluable. And so I think we're making good progress. I think the fact that I think the 2012 one we finished early, the 2017 one we continue to make good progress. And I think at the conclusion of that, I think what we do is I think we sit back, I think we ask the people that were part of the implementation team or the design team, that small group of us that meet to carry it out. I think we get their reflections. I think we get their feelings about how that process after kind of the bigger process has taken place. See if there's any feedback to get from them. And then I think we look forward to what's the next one going to look like. There are some things that will continue to evolve, that will just be ongoing items that we're taking every year. But there'll be other ones that will fall away. And that will be, incumbent upon a lot of different things. But, I think without question, it's an immensely valuable document to any organization. It certainly has served the Auburn Public Schools well. And I would envision that it would be a practice that continues moving forward.
Thank you.
Ms. Holloway?
Casey, as a longtime member of the Auburn Public Schools, and now soon to be its new superintendent, are you aware of any additional professional development opportunities you would wish to see offered to the Auburn Public School staff?
So, there's so many different ways, right, you can go about professional development. I think the research is very clear that, professional development that is just kind of scattershot doesn't really have a whole lot of sticking, just because of the nature of it's just kind of a one-off and there's no kind of follow-through and whatnot. I think the professional development that is most effective, without question, is that which is recurring and has instructional coaching, and offers teachers an opportunity to feel secure in what they've learned and then have that support implementing it in the classroom. And so I think globally, I think that's what we've done as a district, and I think by and large it's been successful. In terms of additional professional development, you can think broad and you can think very, kind of down to, more specific. I think moving forward for a lot of our teachers, I think, ELL, PD is important because a lot of our teachers have to recertify with those PDPs rather, excuse me. I think, targeted special education, professional development for our folks is important, because those are also things that they need as they recertify. But more globally, I think the professional development that really is really critical, it just revolves around the safety of our students. We can talk about all these other things, but, first and foremost, the safety of our children is most important. And, whether that's recurring, training about, first aid, whether that's recurring training about our crisis management plans. We're talking now about training for our staff, for students who have seizure disorders, and on and on and on. I think having kind of a broad approach to things like safety, for example, and then having kind of a targeted approach to things like, special education, ELL, I think is important. We've had a pretty good model in our school district where, again, the research is very clear that teachers learn best from other teachers. And so in March, we've done a kind of a menu model, I think, as you guys are aware, of different, offerings that are delivered by our staff, and that's always been really, really well received. Like anything else, it may be time to just kind of to survey the membership and say, so this is what we've been doing. Is there anything that you would like to see different? And take that under advisement. I think doing that is healthy, and it very well may turn out that things are fine. But I do know that ELL and special education, PDs, more than likely are going to be issues that we need to address.
Thank you.
Sure.
Maureen? So, I know we already talked a little bit about the strategic plan,
Sure.
but one ongoing goal within that plan has to do with strengthening our mental health support programming for
Right.
all of our students. In light of the rise in depression and anxiety among kids of all ages, how do you propose that we do a better job in the district of striking a balance between focusing on our academic and athletic rigor and equipping our students with social and coping skills that they can be used long-term?
Yeah. So I think that question, excuse me, I think that question really strikes to the heart of, kind of the whole social emotional piece, right, in general. The state of Massachusetts, I want to say 3 years ago, has made SEL, or social emotional learning, part of the curriculum. Ironically, we just literally came out of a meeting where we're talking about multiple, tiers of support services, where basically it entwines academic, behavioral, and social and emotional issues together in the classroom. It's still very much in its infancy, both on the state level and definitely here on the district level, but I think what you've seen us do in the last 3 years is get out ahead of this issue. I think we had sent out surveys a few years ago. It really came out of some subcommittee work that we were doing on just stressors and things like that with students. And what was amazing to many on that subcommittee was the amount of anxiety, the amount of depression, or variations thereof within our students. And the ages were just kids at 8, 9, 10 years old. It was amazing. It was amazing. What we've done within the district, and I think it's been something that I've advocated for at the podium as a high school principal, but also something that I've advocated for behind the scenes, is bringing in programs for our students and bringing in appropriate support personnel. So right now we have programs. We bring in different speakers. We've got Second Step, and we've got Spark, and we've got 365Z, we've got Bright, we've got other programs that kind of help students with those related issues. We've brought in different speakers for parents and students, whether it's John Mandelman or other students who have struggled with not other students, excuse me. Well, no, in one case it was a former student, but we've also brought in others from the outside to speak to our kids that are kind of on the same age, around anxiety and depression, and those early steps were about bringing awareness to the issue. I think for us, our programming is starting to look like, or not starting, but is looking like we're addressing it in the classroom, and then we address it kind of writ large in our buildings. This document that was just put forward by the state not too long ago is really about intertwining all three: behavior, academic, and social emotional pieces. There's a long way to go with this work. I think we've started good conversation. I really think that this is going to take the lead in terms of instruction in our school buildings. I think you're starting to see a movement away from the standardized testing phenomenon that we've seen for 20 years, which historically, that's what it bears out, right? Every 20 years we see these flips. 1999 was the first MCAS, and here we are in 2020 talking about moving away from that and moving into, taking care of our kids and their social and emotional needs. So in speaking with other area district principals, and I know just in our most previous meeting this afternoon, we're way out ahead of a lot of school districts as it relates to the services and programming we've already put in place for students and parents. And I think we continue to do that. It's definitely something that has to be at the forefront, of our minds, because I think the outgrowth of not addressing that is potentially horrific.
I agree.
Sure.
Thank you.
So my question's in regards to the budget.
Sure.
As you know, the Auburn School District has 5 schools and many departments. Describe the process you would use to help determine the most appropriate allocation of funds in each year's budget, and if you could touch upon your process for if budget cuts were needed, how you would determine budget cuts.
So I think globally, right, if we had a magic pill for budgets here in the state of Massachusetts and across the country, I think we'd all be swallowing them. Let me just first say that we've been very lucky, in the town of Auburn, that we've not only had, nice support from the state with respect to Chapter 70, but we've also had outstanding support from the town in general in terms of supporting what we're trying to do here, in the Auburn Public Schools. The budget, it's a beast. It really is. It's a beast. 88% or so of our budget, right, is comprised of faculty and staff and other related folks. And so every year, as we've done in the past, 12, under Dr. Brunel's leadership, we've sat in a room and we've looked at, okay, what are our, big rocks? What are our, these would be nice to haves? And what are these non-negotiables that we must have? And you have seen those brought before you every year at budget time. I think when it comes to a situation where you're discussing, if you got into a circumstance where you have to make cuts, it's painful. There's no good way to make cuts. You can only cut so much paper. You can only cut so much books, but that isn't even going to touch, what you're putting in there. So the tack that we've always taken, and I've always agreed with, is that we proceed forward with going at what is going to keep kids insulated the most from being affected. And so, yes, you start out here with the paper and the books and, all of kind of the supply materials. You try to get creative, in terms of how to make that up. And then you just kind of slowly start looking backwards, from there to say, okay, well, what could we go before and what could we go before? The reality of it is that if you have a catastrophic budget year, there's no way of saving people. That's just the way it happens. You look at area communities. I think of Shrewsbury as an example. Back in 2012, the money wasn't there from the state. The money wasn't there in local municipalities. And we were very fortunate here in Auburn that we were able to work with our union at the time to restructure the way that we had our contracts established so that we saved people's jobs. On the town side, they did some discussion around insurance and some things that would kind of help on that end of it. So, there's always those types of things too, that it doesn't necessarily always have to mean, okay, well, we're going to pink slip 15 people. You can try and get creative around it, but, there really is no good way to do it. I mean, if somebody has had something before me today, certainly it would not be done in isolation. It would be done in discussions with the leadership teams. We've always done it. But I think, if push came to shove, and I always reserve the right to change my mind, but if push came to shove, I think it's just common sense, right? And that our youngest students are the ones who need the most service, whether it's academic, emotional, whatever. They can't necessarily advocate for themselves, and so it's imperative that, in a bad budget year, that we preserve as much K-8 as we can. Living in the high school landscape as I do, I have a different perspective on how that could, still work, obviously. When we had gone to our schedule in 2012 of the trimesters that we're in now, part of the reason why we went to it was because if we ever got into a catastrophic budget scenario, we wouldn't love it at all, but we could lose staff and still provide our basic general education to each and every student at a high level. What we did in 2012 and what we've done every year thereafter is we've provided a very robust program to our kids. They're very fortunate that they have a variety of electives, they have a variety of levels of study, they have a variety of co-curricular activities that they can be involved in. But if we were ever to get into a catastrophic budget scenario, we could, again, we wouldn't love it, but we could make some adjustments up there to where it would hurt a little bit, but it would maintain the integrity of K-8 programming. Because you can't get to B if you don't have A, if that makes any sense, right? Does that answer your question?
Perfect.
Okay, thank you.
All right, back to me again. I won't be as difficult as... I'm just kidding. That was a great question. Casey, we have worked hard, yourself included, building strong partnerships with the Auburn community. We constantly strive to be transparent and to improve upon those relationships. How will you ensure that we continue that transparency and relationship building?
Well, so there's two ways to look at this, right? At least from my perspective. There's the municipal side, right? Because we're part of a greater whole here in the town. But then there's the school side, and that's primarily what we do here in the town, right? I think, you know, and maybe this goes back to what I said earlier, I think the conversation, real conversations with people, I think is the way that you always maintain your transparency. I think, you know, being very open and honest, you know, on the town side, you know, to town hall about what the needs of the school district are, and then hearing what they have to say back, and then kind of getting into that, you know, respectful and collegial give and take that will undoubtedly happen, as it happens every year, I think is really important. I think it's really important that we, as a school system, understand that we're interdependent on our other agencies in town. And so we have to be mindful of the fact that, you know, yes, we're here to advocate for our students, and we want to give them the absolute best possible education we can, but we also have to do that within the realm of understanding that there are other needs within the town. Now, that doesn't mean I'm soft. I just want to be very clear. I'm not one iota. It just means that I am very much aware of the broader picture as it relates to finance and things like that. On the school side, in terms of the transparency piece, again, you know, it's communication, and I think when you look across our school district, you know, we're all about the communication piece. You know, whether it's, you know, one calls, whether it's, you know, quarterly newsletters, you know, the individual emails that go home from principals, you know, to their families. You know, we send out so many communications to our families. And I think that continues. I think, you know, it's about spreading the news and controlling the narrative and letting people know all of the awesome things that we're doing. And then when there does come, you know, everyone is fine when everything is fine. When everything isn't fine, that's when you hear from people. And I think it's really imperative that when everything isn't going to be fine, that you try to anticipate that to the extent that you can. And again, it's just about transparency. None of us can work in isolation. We need to get the opinions of people, especially those who are going to be the affected parties in certain decisions. And, you know, at the end of the day, as long as there's a clear understanding of where both parties are, then I think, you know, you move forward. And I think that's the only way you continue those relationships, you know. I don't know any other way to do it.
Great. Thanks for that answer.
So back to the strategic plan, and you did touch on this when you answered my first question, but maybe just be a little more clear.
Sure.
You had mentioned that progress continues, and we have met many of the goals. 2012, you also said that you guys finished early. So at the rate we're going, we might finish early. Once all the goals are met, how could we and/or would we continue the success moving forward?
So that's a good question. You know, I think, you know, the nature of education ebbs and flows. You know, there's going to be competing interests, there's going to be different interests, there's going to be different priorities. You know, as an example, you know, I look at this document that just came up from the Department of Ed, you know, the multiple tiered support services. This is going to be a big item moving forward for us. And so this could be, and I'm just saying this, just spitballing again with you, this may be understated in the current strategic plan. And so maybe this is something that we have to really dig into and say, you know what, instead of maybe having 5 focus areas for the next however many years, we're going to have 3, and we're going to break this up into different pieces. You know, I think that's one part of it. I think the other part of it is trying to anticipate things that may be coming down the road. So, for example, you know, I have been in this business for 25 or so years. I can remember there being an awful recession in 2000. I can remember there being one in 2012. And if you do the math, we're just about maybe on the brink of another one, right? So what does that mean for the Auburn Public Schools? You know, and what is it? And so having those conversations and, you know, looking at our current strategic plan and saying, okay, so we've done all these wonderful things with teaching and learning and technology and so on and so forth. So if we value these things moving forward and anticipating some challenges that may be forthcoming, how do we maintain the integrity of what we've built and what we've done while also addressing new challenges like this? Does that help? Does that make sense?
It does, and now I want one of those so I can meet.
Here you go. You can have that one. Enjoy.
No,
If he
that
wants
was.
to refer
thank
back
you.
to it, you're gonna have to give it back.
No,
No, it's
it has to
fine.
be here.
It just happens to be right at my disposal because we literally just came out of the meeting about it, so,
That's new information.
yeah.
No, that was great, thank you.
All the way?
As the Auburn superintendent, you will have many on the leadership team to rely on when problems arise, such as here today. But if there should be a problem between staff and perhaps a new administrator, how would you go about resolving those concerns so all can continue to work together?
Well, yeah, I think conflict is kind of an inherent part of the, you know, human condition, right? Nobody likes it, but it's definitely going to be, you know, something that comes forward. You know, conflict is hard, and managing conflict is hard, and, you know, having those conversations can be hard, you know, and you know, I guess I've always kind of found myself in a circumstance when I've been, you know, kind of in the middle of dealing with an issue that, you know, both sides, more oftentimes than not, have some valuable input. They have some valid points. And for whatever reason, perhaps either side is not hearing the other on certain things because they just get to a place where they're just so aggravated or so, you know, put off in the moment that they're not hearing certain things. So, you know, bringing together the conversation and establishing the ground rules that, you know, you can have a difficult conversation with somebody and still remain friends and still, you know, walk out of the room at the end of the night together, or day together, whatever, you know, can happen. And I think it's about establishing, you know, kind of some norms, you know, in those circumstances. I also think it's important that, you know, that there's some dipsticking that happens, you know, fairly regularly among, you know, in this case, it would be among the leadership team, about how things are going. How are you feeling? You know, is there anything that's really under your skin? How can I help that process? And in a lot of cases, people say, you know what, I'll take care of it, or I can whatever. But in some cases, that doesn't always happen to be the case. And so you come together and you have conversation in an environment where it's safe, you know, and it's people should feel safe to just put it on the table. I mean, we've had several, you know, over 15 years or 12 years, you know, that Dr. Brunel's here, you know, and that's the only way you go. I think, you know, we here in the room, at least I think we in the room, think of ourselves as a family, you know, and the longevity of the majority of us in this room, I think speak to that. And so, like all families, you're going to fight and have disagreements, but at the end of the day, you still love them. And at the end of the day, you know, you're going to get past whatever has gone on. You're going to find some sort of middle ground, or sometimes they leave the house, you know, and that's an option too. But I'd like to think that that's the very, very far exception, you know, to the rule. But, you know, you got to just be able to have that environment where you're approachable and open and honest, and just allow people to be candid without fear of, you know, retaliation or whatever. And sometimes it's hard to hear difficult things. None of us like it, you know, myself included. But the only way you're going to function, you know, at a high level in an organization is to be able to have those conversations.
Thank you.
Next question.
All right, so we're going to go over a little bit more about social and emotional needs for students.
Sure.
What programs have you implemented during your tenure at Auburn High School that was going towards that goal in the strategic plan? And then if you have any ideas about new district-wide proposals for further addressing this issue, would you feel comfortable in sharing that with us, as well as telling us how you would support your staff in implementing that plan?
So for us, at least at the high school level, our kids, first of all, nothing's done in isolation, right? We're all working together to do things as a group, so I don't want it to make it seem like this is happening, without the help of others, because that's not the case. We, I'll use one example. So, we have an alternative education program, in Auburn, and I'll go back to my arrival in 2005. The dropout data, for example, was, I think for 2004 or 5, whichever, I remember being almost as high as 6%, which was a large number. And so as, kind of each year went along, we knew we needed to get that number down. So how are we going to get that number down? And it became a function of, identifying, who are our most at-risk kids for dropping out, and what supports do they need, right? And for a lot of them in that time, social emotional issues just haven't come out of the sky. They've been around forever. They're just getting airtime, most recently with kind of all of the things that have been going on in the country and in schools and things like that. So, back in those days, it was really looking at how do we create a kind of an alternative educational environment, for those students who are most needy. And it's what we call now in our building, Project Enterprise. And that's evolved quite a bit over the years. It used to be a circumstance where they were with one individual all day, some of our kids. And then as, kind of things shifted and people retired and I was evaluating things, we shifted into a model that we have right now in Project Enterprise where it's co-taught. It's an English and a social studies teacher, it's a math and it's a science teacher, and there's a foreign language teacher, and they teach in pairs except for the foreign language teacher. And then there's somebody who provides support, enterprise support, which is kind of an opportunity for kids just to kind of blow off some steam, chit-chat about different things, participate in like restorative circles, talk through more about what's going on, kind of in their lives, letting them unpack things. We've seen the graduation rates go down to almost below 1%, and so I can never take full credit or nor do I think anything that we do is solely responsible for that outcome, but I'd like to think that was something that, that has helped and continues to help our students moving forward. We, as a district, at the middle school and the high school level, have just started a program, and you've heard us talk about it at different meetings, the BRIGHT program, students who are, fragile, socially and emotionally, and who maybe typically would be out on home hospitalizations and isolated from the school community. We just started those programs, at Dr. Brunel's urging and Dr. Chamberlain's urging and Mrs. Reedy's urging in support this fall. And so basically what that is it's a 6-week kind of interim period where kids can come in. They can work, with a counselor. They can work with a teacher, special educator, whomever's staffing the room. Gives them a safe place to kind of get themselves back on track, emotionally, etc. It gives them a point of contact for someone to go out and advocate for them to teachers to say, hey, listen, Johnny's coming in with, having just been hospitalized for whatever the reason is, and we work out their workload to where it's manageable, and then the idea is after 6 weeks or so, if not earlier, we get them back out into the regular education program. It serves two purposes. First and foremost, I think it gets our kids into school where they belong. But from a budgetary standpoint, it's also money that we're not spending on home tutoring and things like that. To extend that, so to answer the second part of your question, what additional ideas, do I have? And again, this is purely spitballing right now. Would be to look at the possibility of, right now we're sending our students out to, collaboratives at times when they can't manage to be in school, even in a BRIGHT setting or an alternative setting. is there a way for us here in the town of Auburn to establish maybe our own kind of in-house collaborative? Is there a place, a building in town that, for the amount of money that we're using right now to send kids out, could we capitalize on creating our own program, similar to a Bright, but just extended? Not having the exact budget numbers in front of me. It's substantial, though, what we send out, and I think, that is something that I would very much like to take a look at and see if there's a way to do that. The benefit to that isn't just financial. The other benefit to that is you don't lose track of those kids. I think, all of us would agree, nobody can do the service to our children like we can, and like those of us who work with us. And so if we can open up something that can service our children like that, not only is it a huge windfall for us, and maybe potentially we're not, in a big budget situation because we're actually helping ourselves, but it's just better for our kids. And we've seen some of that, even in our special education program. Mrs. Reedy and Dr. Brunel and Dr. Chamberlain, we've tuitioned in a student from another school district into our Rise and Evolve program because they don't have the capacity, to do that. So that little kind of experiment is turning out very well. We're making a little bit of money on it, but we're also starting to realize that, if we can build the capacity internally, we might be able to get more students, coming our way. So that's an additional kind of thought that I have. Truly, it's spitballing. I haven't thought beyond what I just said to you. But because I don't know what that would look like. I mean, there's so many logistics, but I think it very possibly could work.
That's great. Thank you. That's a good answer. And other districts do have a similar
Yeah.
structure like this.
Yeah.
I like it.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. In order to make decisions as school committee members, it's essential that we have all the information. As the new superintendent, how will you ensure applicable transparency between teachers, administration, the leadership team, and the school committee?
So just like individually, just however. So I think one of the things that has worked, for us in terms of transparency, at least in district, is those face-to-face meetings with people. We were in one today with staff at the high school, and it was terrific. It was a meeting that maybe should have happened a little bit earlier about an issue, but it didn't for whatever reason, and those things happen. But the outcome of that today was the staff being able to kind of address some issues that were of concern to them, and for us to hear as administration what those concerns were, and kind of come to a mutual understanding about potential solutions. So again, I think it's always about kind of that mutual discussion and face-to-face interaction. In terms of just speaking to any constituency group, I mean, as the school committee, it would be within your purview. I would want to know, what do you want to know about? When do you want to know it? What's your preferred method of communication? Maybe we obviously can't get together as a group and have me tell you something directly. Do you prefer a phone call? Do you prefer whatever? And what are the bounds? You need to define some of that for me because I don't know what you're used to or what you'd like. I mean, I tend to be somewhat of an oversharer, and I think I also tend to be somebody who understands this is serious stuff, and people above me need to know about it. And that's the way that we've kind of done business in this school district, for a long, long time. No surprises, right? No side swipes. So even if there's the hint of that, it's always good to have a heads up. So, because I don't like the side swipe or the big surprise.
The screenshot of Facebook.
Yeah, the screenshot of Facebook or whatever. And, unfortunately, that's the age that we're living in. And we can, and again, back to my earlier comment, that's where we have to really work hard to control the narrative as a school district, and we're not always going to be able to. But to the extent possible, if we saturate, the masses with our message, hopefully, that type of thing is an exception and not the rule. I stay off the Auburn Facebook site for that very reason, just because, just because, sure.
All right, great job answering those questions. At this point in time, I would ask you to share those where you have been.
Thanks. So, yeah, so this has been kind of an emotional and a bittersweet kind of last few weeks. You know, I'm a 1993 graduate, you know, of Auburn High School. I grew up on Boy Street, 141. My brother lives in 137, and my sister is down the street on the corner of Shirley and Boyce. You know, growing up in Auburn, you know, it was a special thing. The environment that I remember as a boy in this school district is what has made me the man that I am today. And when I look back on my schooling in the town of Auburn, you know, Gail, I'm looking at you right now, but I'm thinking of Jerry in the corner over there. Well, Mr. Rich is here too.
Yeah,
my
Dick
sixth
Eden.
grade teacher, and I'm thinking of all, you know, the teachers, you know, from Marcia Perry to, you know, Joan Polakowski to Bernie Holloway to, you know, Rich to Kendra Underwood to whomever, you know, Art Brunel, I could just keep going. And what a profound influence they had on my life. And, you know, when it came time to do something moving forward, it was about, you know, service unto others, you know, as the service you provided to me. Because it was invaluable in those years, more than all of you will maybe ever realize. So from Auburn, I went to Assumption College and graduated from there in 1997. I was a psychology and a liberal arts major, and at the time you couldn't major in education, so it was a concentration. And always having a backup plan, because that's how I like to roll. I had a full scholarship opportunity to stay at Assumption in 97 and get my CAGS in counseling psychology, and that's where I was going to go if I couldn't secure a teaching job. And I was very fortunate that we graduated May 28th, and I was offered a teaching job at Wachusett Regional High School on or about May 5th, I think. It was so nice to have the last month of school knowing I had a job. And so I turned down the scholarship, and I went to Wachusett. And was a teacher of social studies for 4 years.
Good choice.
Thank you. During that time, the state had just started flexing its muscles on the masters for teachers. And those of us who were in those early years, you know, initially you had a 5-year window. So me being the compliant type A that I was, I got myself right into a master's program at the University of Connecticut. And so in 2001, I finished my master's in curriculum and instruction, but the focus was on gifted and talented education, which isn't all about just high IQs, but that can be another discussion another day. Upon my completion of my master's at UConn, I was walking through the mailroom, and it was late in August, and I had been away, and I was just checking my mailbox. And my building principal came out and said, "Hey, how you doing?" And "Oh, whatever, fine." And then he let me know that one of our vice principals had just accepted a job in Lake Sunapee. And school was set to open in 2 weeks, and they were kind of short, you know, for administrators. And so he said, "You know, you want to do it?" And at first I was like, "No, not really. Like, why, you know, why would I?" Yeah, it was just whatever. I was enjoying teaching, and I was enjoying coaching, and I was enjoying doing other things that I was doing, student council at the time. But Julia had just come along, my oldest daughter, and the salary differential was insane. And so I had to kind of make a financial decision at that time, because I think I was making like $32,000 a year, and it went to like 64, like in the snap of a finger. So I became an administrator, an assistant principal, and during those 4 years, I started teaching at Assumption College. It's a position that I still hold today on an adjunct level. I only teach freshmen because I very much believe in the power of the transition. I also very much believe in teaching as one of the noblest professions there can be. And I also know how important it is that if you have a bad experience as a freshman, you know, that can turn you off mightily. So, and I also wanted to stay relevant in the teaching practice. First semester and second semester freshmen, as some of you can attest, are not that far off of our high school seniors. And so I wanted to stay current, you know, in the in the field. So I never really lost, why I got into it in the first place. In 2005, my class at Wachusett had graduated. The principalship here in Auburn was open. Had been open for a long time, which I thought was kind of odd. And I wasn't even really aware because I wasn't looking. At Wachusett, we were just busy. We were doing things. We had just come off of a NEASC visit. We were going through a horrid construction project. And it was just whatever. I was just kind of doing my thing. And I was outreached by Ron Prouty at the time, if I would have any interest in applying for the principalship. And at first I said no, and then he called me back and said, just give it a try, it'd be a good experience. And so I did, and interviewed 4 times, or they called me back 4 times before they offered me the position. And so that was in 2005. And, after that, I made a decision to bring my family back to Auburn. My brother and sister soon followed with their children. I got my certificate of advanced graduate study at AIC in Central Office Administration in 2009. And will be defending my dissertation from Johns Hopkins, or at Johns Hopkins, March 30th. And so that's kind of where I've been, what I've done. I'm not going to go into everything ad nauseum. I mean, you folks have been around a long time, and I have certainly appreciated your support every step of the way. We've done a lot of really good things in Auburn. The question becomes, why me? Well, I think first and foremost for me personally, the whole leadership thing, it's just something that has always kind of just gravitated towards me and me towards that. Can't really explain it. It's just something that you do. Being as invested as I am in this community, my heart bleeds blue without question. And when you look around at other area communities and you see what those communities have gone through with instability of leadership, and you see, what I perceive in many cases to be instances of just, educational malpractice going on, could never allow that to happen in this town. For me, it means a little bit more. And that's not to say that it doesn't mean anything to these folks out here, because I'm going to tell you, these people are some of the hardest working educators. They are some of the finest working educators you're ever going to see. And I'm so very proud that they're in the room tonight, and I've worked with them for as long as I have. But it just means more. You've seen in my application packet, I started working, in the satellite room, when it first started. I was the first male in through the door. And that opened up a whole, kind of new area, for men in kind of education at that time. I've coached in this town. I've just given my heart and soul to this town, and I think we've had good results. That doesn't mean that everything that we've ever done is perfect, but I think we've been okay. And I've been very proud, as I've said, to work for the last 12 years with Dr. Brunel and my colleagues who came thereafter. And again, I'm very uncomfortable talking about myself, but I had forwarded you, some materials this afternoon that kind of gave you a better insight, into kind of, Casey from, kind of 18 to Casey to now. And it actually happened by accident. It happened because I have a W.B. Mason box in my office, and every nicety that I've ever gotten, I just throw in the box, because on those days when it really is miserable, I'll just go and pick one out. And over the weekend, I was going through the box, and even this morning, Eileen can attest to that. I was going through the box, and it means something. It means something, and you have to love children. You have to love your staff. You have to love what you're doing, and it makes all the sense in the world to me. I think you'd be very hard-pressed to find another candidate who has the perspective of a resident, a parent, a principal, and a graduate. I know the town very well. I know the folks in the town very well. I had both of Julie Jacobson's kids at Wachusett. Matter of fact, I had forgotten all about a letter she wrote me when I was at Wachusett, when I really didn't even know her, that I found digging through some stuff. CFO Kazanovitz and I are very, amicable. as are, the people on the different town boards, and people at Auburn Youth and Family, and just people in town in general, so I don't think that there's going to be a big hiccup. I mean, obviously, Dr. Brunel's departure is a huge loss, and she's not leaving. We're not letting her leave. She might be behind those curtains. Right? Isn't that what you told me on the phone? Yeah, something like that. So it's just, I just think it's a win all the way around. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think we have a great team here. I think we're doing a lot of great things. I think we're going to continue to do a lot of great things. You've been a wonderful committee over the years to work with, as have the people who've come before you. And I've worked well with them as well. Those are my letters of recommendation from the two previous school committee chairs. And where we were in '05 to where we are now, it's like night and day. It's like night and day. And, I don't ever want to go back to those days. And so, I think together, we can continue all the great things we're doing here in Auburn and continue to be a destination district, because we really are a destination district. So with that, there's really nothing more I can say.
That was good.
I did like your haircut in the picture.
Which one?
From Satellite.
The newspaper.
That wasn't a mullet. That
wasn't a mullet. That was that everyone thinks that was a mullet. That was
the
a
first
hot air balloon. Off the hot air balloon was like a ribbon. The way I'm standing, it looks like a ribbon coming off the back of my head. I know.
It was the first thing I asked.
It did.
Complimented him on it.
It did then, and it still does now. And ironically, that little boy in that picture with me, Michael Ramsey, was adopted from Guatemala, and he came to us. He had only been in the country 2 months, and spoke not a whole lot of English, and there was nothing for kids back in those days. And we taught him English. I remember sitting there teaching him English, and he'd wear a little necktie at school every day, and he's a grown man now with a family, and it's those types of things it's why you do the work. It's why you do the work, and so yeah, that's it. That's all I got.
Excellent. Well, if you could just stay seated there for a minute. It
Sure.
seems like you're getting ready to head out somewhere. Just give me a minute.
Okay. It's been a long
At
day.
this point in time, before we'll save our comments for after the second, when we get the motion to appoint Mr. Hanfield. But before that, before I ask for that motion, I would like to ask the audience if there's anyone who has any comments. So this would be a citizens' comments time, or? No? All right. Seeing no one to comment, now I will entertain that motion.
Casey, as one of your former teachers, I am honored to make the motion that we appoint you, Mr. Casey Hanfield, as Superintendent of Schools effective July 1st, 2020, pending successful contract negotiations.
Do I have a second?
Second.
And now I will open it up to any comments, questions?
I mean, I was in a meeting at Assumption just 2 weeks ago, and someone said, is he going for it? Is he going for it? I can't say yet, it's not official yet. So, I mean, all the way there, they know you. And I think I can't think of anyone better, so.
Thank you.
Yeah, agreed. I think, through the chair, I think we're in excellent hands. We are really sad to see Mary Ellen, but hopefully you'll go and do fun things. But I feel like, our district is in really good hands, and I thoroughly look forward to working with you.
That's double. I mean, Dr. Brunel's been wonderful, and she's going to leave big shoes to fill, but I think you can do it, because you're as committed to Auburn as she is and was, and that's what we need.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I second what she said. Dr. Brunel has done wonderful things for the district, and she's been a pleasure to work with, and I truly believe that you're going to continue the greatness that she has created, so looking forward to the future.
Okay. I would echo all of those sentiments, and Dr. Brunel will certainly be missed, and this will not be the goodbye, because we have plenty of time for that. But what I will say is this is a situation where, you know, maybe we should feel somewhat easy, or maybe there was a little bit of discomfort leading up to this when we heard from Dr. Brunel that she wasn't going to be with us after this year. Well, in the school system after this year, she's going to be with us. But no, after that announcement, you know, being around town, different sporting events, dropping my kids off here or there, the grocery store, you name it, there was just the commentary really was nothing but support for Mr. Hanfield. And is he going to go for that position? I think it'd be great. And I just can't tell you how many conversations that happened at, you name it, at the basketball court, at a Christmas party, everywhere. So again, and a situation like this where you should be a little bit uncomfortable, there are big changes about to take place. It was really comforting, and there's no second guessing at this point. I'm very confident, as I believe the committee is. So I think we're going to continue, as Ms. Sarrington said, I think we're going to continue the greatness. So
Thank you.
at this point in time,
Did we vote?
we did not.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
It is a vote.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thank you all very, very much. As I said, this is a bittersweet thing for me. I'm leaving very shortly a high school that I love dearly, and the teachers and the kids that are in it. But the opportunity to work more closely with my colleagues and the ability to hopefully, kind of expand, my sphere of influence in only a positive manner is exciting to me. You might not be uncomfortable, but I am right now, very much so. This is a huge undertaking, but it's one that I'm ready for, and I think the timing is right. So I'm thrilled. I am. I don't let this fool you. I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled. It's just been a long week, so long few weeks leading up to today. So thank you all very much.
Glad to
and I
hear
appreciate it.
If you could just trade places with Dr. Brunel, and
Sure.
we'd like to congratulate you personally on your way out.
Sure.
And through the chair, she's been saying
Congratulations.
she's been writing everything down. So there's lots of notes for you.
Yeah, why not?
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I'll just come that way. It's all right.
Now, if you ever need her, just kidnap her dog.
Yeah.
And she will follow. That is true. See?
Congratulations.
Yep.
Excuse me, sorry.
All right. That was nice.
Yeah.
And again, nice of all of you to be here.
Yeah.
And we'll now turn it over to Dr. Brunel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So with Mr. Hanfield's appointment, it is my recommendation that we post immediately for his replacement at Auburn High School. So I do want to establish an interview team, very much in keeping with how we've handled all administrator hires. In fact, I've got the emails ready to go out, so we'll send it out to parents tomorrow to seek their input, leadership team representation, and also school committee representation. So set aside the date of Saturday, February 29th for interviews. So we'll actually hit send when I end this meeting to get the posting out effective the 6th, I think, and up to the 20th. So I open it up to you. We can have up to 2 of you participate on that team. We do have one meeting before then, but it's February 26th. So it would be preferred that we find the 2 tonight, because we may have a meeting before then.
Are those application requests going out to School Spring, or is this an in-house?
This will go to School Spring.
School Spring.
We'll do a full, and there, I would suspect there may be internal candidates and some external ones as well.
Okay.
But just in keeping with how we've done it previously, we'll do a full search.
Okay.
Yep.
I would be interested in serving on the committee.
That's what I.
Okay with that?
Oh, yeah.
That was easy enough. So I would entertain the motion to approve the posting
I make a motion to approve the posting for Auburn High School principal as presented in the packet.
Do I have a second?
Second?
All in favor?
All right.
Aye, it is a vote. I would now entertain the motion to have Mrs. Harrington and Ms. Kaufman represent us on that committee.
I'll make a motion to have Mrs. Harrington and Mrs. Kaufman serve as school committee representatives for the AHS principal interview team.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, it is a vote. And we do need an executive
We
session this
do,
evening.
yes, there should be a small slip of paper. Yes, exactly.
Okay, this is a big one.
Let me make sure that that is the right, actually, pass that over to make sure that's the accurate one. Not, yours looks a little longer. I just want to make sure the right one gets read.
Yeah, they're the same.
Oh, I
23B7.
okay,
Okay.
okay.
I make a motion to enter into executive session under Mass General Law, Chapter 39, Section 23B7, to comply with Mass General Law, Chapter 71, Section 34D, regarding 603 CMR 23, student records, and under Mass General Law, Chapter 39, Section 23B, subset 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining with non-union personnel.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
That's why we have the paper.
I'm going to take it laminated for one of
Roll call vote?
Dr. McCrillis?
Yes.
Mrs. Kaufman?
Yes.
Mrs. Holloway?
Yes.
Mrs. Harrington?
Yes.
Mr. Stobie?
Yes. Good night, everyone.
Okay.